Hey, Chad Tomaszewski with Tridon Communications, TSI Today, back filming here in the studio. Thanks a lot for joining us. My very first guest is Doug Horn, project manager at CP Rail, storied career, been around the block more than a few times, and just a pile of experience inside telecommunications and technology. One of the stories we're going to hear about is the very first phone call made in China.
I'm Chad Tomaszewski, Chief Growth Officer with Tridon Communications. We're talking to industry leaders about the technology that's changing their business. This is TSI Today.
Hey, thanks for joining us on TSI Today. Today we're talking about next generation technologies, and I'm privileged to have Doug Horn here with me today, project manager with CP Rail. Doug, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome, Chad.
A series of questions I wanted to kind of go through with you, talking about technologies, and that's really what the entire series is about, is new tech today, the tech we've used in our careers, and how we can use that technology to create efficiencies in our lives. So for yourself, you had a storied career. You've been around for some time now, multiple different projects that you've got to play with. If you were to think back on all the RF projects you've got to be involved with over the years, which one do you think was the most fulfilling for yourself?
In Calgary in 1986, there was a company called Novotel. And Novotel was a developer of cellular technology, and they were way ahead of their time. And I was actually sitting in the bar in the Explorer Hotel in Yellowknife with Mark Henderson, who is now the president of Ericsson. And he says, I need somebody to go to China. And I went, I'll go. And he hired me right on the spot. And so I spent 3 years in China. And we actually made the very first cellular telephone call in the city of Chongqing in China. Michael Tunich and I called Mayor Ma. Mayor Ma was a general from Mao Zedong. And it was, if you look back at the time, 1986 in China basically was at 1964 because Mao had locked the country down. But then you look at China today. Last time I was in Hong Kong, the taxi driver had 7 cell phones sitting on his dash, you know. One for his work, one for his secret work, one for his wife, one for his girlfriend, you know, that sort of thing. And if you look at how technology has changed, you know, from, you know, large, complex, integrated analog systems to where they are today, the technology is moving faster and faster and faster, and it's getting smaller and smaller. You know, I mean, you look at your watch, you have a smartwatch, and that watch is now basically a complete miniature computer. There's more computing power in that watch than there was to take the men to the moon in 1969.
That's incredible to think that.
Yeah, so this is where technology is going. It's getting smaller and it's getting faster.
Incredible. So I'm glad you went down the LTE path. When we look to push to talk, another form of RF, there's a lot of people out in the industry today that would say that it's coming to an end. Push to talk is a thing of the past. However, in projects like the ones you're dealing with today, push to talk is just something that'll never go away. Talk to us a little bit about some of the push to talk areas where we need to use a push to talk radio no matter what, and LTE or phones just don't have the ability to replace it, at least not today.
A lot of people don't understand what LTE is. They don't even understand the definition. LTE stands for long-term evolution. So LTE is not even a definition of what the technology is. It's more of where the technology is going. Push to talk was basically developed, you know, in around 1939. And it was developed as part of the war effort, you know, in World War II, so that they, you know, the people could communicate with their troops on the ground and with the airplanes. That technology is no different today. The units, the radios are smaller and they're faster and they take up less space, but the actual technology has not changed since 1939. The evolution that LTE brings is a whole different world because LTE is strictly a data network. There is no voice in LTE, it's all data. And if you look at the new products where they're actually introducing now press to talk in LTE phones. So I could take my cell phone and I can have a press to talk app on my phone, because press to talk it's mission critical. And it's used throughout the oil industry, it's used by the military, and companies like CP Rail, where I currently work, and that technology is not going away. like I say, the units are getting smaller, the radios are getting smaller, they're getting less expensive to purchase and to maintain, and they're all software based, but the actual technology hasn't changed since 1939. It's still the same.
It's really interesting to think that, because I know did they actually perfect it when they first brought it out, or it's gotten better throughout the years? Obviously, we have better sound canceling, we have better abilities to go longer range, we have different formats that we can communicate on, multiple channels, multiple bands. So it's gotten better in that sense, but it's mind-boggling to think that you've got a technology that's that robust, that good, that since 1939, I believe you said, it hasn't really changed a whole lot aside from going from analog to digital and some better mics and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
And that's where the manufacturers have really stepped to the plate and developed new features, new software, but it's all functionality. But the actual function of pressing the radio and communicating and saying, hello, are you there? That hasn't changed. Whether it's digital or analog, or whether it goes through the LTE network, through the public network. And the only difference between the private radio systems and the LTE network is that the private radio networks are built by the specific customers, like CP Rail. CP Rail owns their own network. Syncrude, they own their own network. But on the Syncrude site, they still have an LTE base station there, and LTE is used every day, through TELUS and Bell and Rogers. The carriers are still operating and competing for that business. But when it comes down to security, integrity, and the maintainability, certain clients decide to go private and have their own private radio systems.
So we're seeing private radio systems and a lot of private LTE going now, where organizations are going to private LTE. A lot of that has to do with automation. Some of it has to do with automated vehicles, and specifically inside the oil and gas area, where they want to have autonomous haul happening. So 5G, private LTE, is kind of that missing link that's helping with that. We think back through your career, all the technologies you've got to be involved with. Which one do you think was the most influential?
Basically, it comes down to the microchip, and it comes down to Moore's Law, and where each generation of microprocessor is getting smaller and faster in a logarithmic scale. And like I say, your watch is a perfect example. That didn't exist 5 years ago.
Right.
It's here today. Is it going to get smaller? Eventually, you're going to have a chip embedded into your skin. That'll be your credit card. You'll just wave your hand, like.
I see it coming, for sure.
Well, if you look at Star Trek was a perfect example.
That's where the flip phone came from,
That's
right?
where the flip phone came from, the little miniature readers that they use for scanning for the doctor. That we have that today. That technology that was put on the screen on TV in 1969 is real today.
Is there a project you were involved in the past where you look back and you go, man, I wish I could do that again with the technology that you have today?
Oh, hundreds. It's hard to pick out one, because I've been introducing change to the world of telecom for over 40 years. My very first project that I installed was a single channel radio system in Fort Saskatchewan, and I took out a single, like it was a full 8-foot rack of equipment, and I removed that and put in a C carrier, which was 3 channels on a rack, and that was, that tripled the capacity of that particular network. That was in 1973. That's not that many years. Now, in a hair of a fiber, you can have a terabyte of data.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, so that's where it's gone. It's gone from open wire to fiber. Yeah. Where is it going next? I don't know. Elon Musk, maybe? Satellite? It's
lots of technology coming out of that, man, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Change, I think, is what's kept me in this industry for as long as I've been in. I'm doing 28 years, not 40 yet. But I anticipate I'll be here for 40 plus years, just like yourself. So it was always something that was always evolving. And I fell into this industry. I didn't set out to be in the telecoms business at all. And I just kind of, by happenstance, am in it 28 years later and loving it. And I think the thing that I'm encouraged about all the time is the constant change. There's always some new technology I get to play with. That kind of brings me to my last question for you. Young people, if we look at our industry today, we don't do a great job of doing a download, taking all the knowledge that you have, Doug, and downloading that into somebody young, or at least portions of it that are relevant to today's technology, so that we can carry on. How do you feel we can do a better job in getting young people involved in our industry?
There's two critical problems. The first critical problem is our education system, okay? Because the education system is designed for intellectuals. I have people in my team that have PhDs. They've been in university for 12 to 14 years. But you can't give them a screwdriver. They're downright dangerous in the field. You can't let them go into the building. The people that we work in the field. We build things. And so you need, good Saskatchewan farm boys to know how to twist wrenches. But you also have to introduce them to the technology. And the education system has really slipped. And so it's companies like yourself where you're willing to take on young people and train them on-the-job training. The bad thing is that training isn't reflected in a piece of paper. So when you go to look for another job, if you look at myself, for example, I'm not qualified to do my job, even though I have 40 years of experience and the equivalent training of 4 degrees and a master's in economics. But I never wrote the test. I'm a project manager, but I took the PMI training, but I refused to pay them $1,000 to write the test. So on paper, I'm a nothing. So if I go and apply for a job, I'm not qualified, because right now AI and the computers are the ones that decide who gets the next job. And they look for the PMP, they look for the PEng, they look for the master's degree, and the PhDs. And if you don't have those initials behind your name, you go to the bottom of the list. So for me to get work, I have to get work through relationships. Like you and I have a relationship. We've known each other for a very long time. And that's how I get work. But for the young guys starting up today, they don't have a hope. If they only have, on-the-job training, it's very difficult for them to advance. But the education system is actually set up against them because it takes them for their prime time to learn, and it puts them in a classroom in an educational bubble, but then they have no practical experience. And how we're going to resolve that, I don't know. But it's guys like you that can make the difference.
I'm going to keep asking the question because I think there's an answer for us to figure out there. And I think if we bring, great minds like ours together, and sooner or later we're going to get it figured out because we need those people to help us take over.
Yeah,
right, for sure.
Yeah.
Chat GPT can't do it all.
No, you're absolutely
At least I hope
right.
not.
And it's the whole industry has to step forward because there is no formal training in the stuff that we do.
For sure.
It doesn't exist today.
That's great. Doug, thanks so much for joining me today. I look
welcome.
forward to catching up with you at our round table here in a little bit.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks for watching TSI Today. Catch up with us next time when we learn more about technology changing business today.